Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. My name is Taryn Ellis. I am 32 years old, and I used to believe my husband was the safest place in my life. 3 days after our wedding, I stood outside room 2847 at an oceanfront resort in Key West, Florida, holding an empty ice bucket with trembling fingers. The door to that room had not closed all the way because the security latch was caught against the frame, leaving a narrow opening. Through that gap, past the half-drawn curtains, I saw my husband, Brandon Bennett, pull another woman into his arms. Her name was Vanessa Hall. She was the polished colleague he had introduced at our wedding as someone from his office who had happened to book a vacation at the same resort. She had hugged me at the reception, admired my dress, and told me Brandon was a lucky man. Now she was kissing him like she had known his mouth long before I ever walked down the aisle. The ice bucket slipped from my hand and hit the marble floor, sending cubes across the hallway. Neither of them heard. Music played softly inside the room, and they were laughing too loudly to notice anything outside their door. My own suite was 2408, on the opposite side of the resort, the suite I was supposed to be sharing with my husband. Room 2847 was not our honeymoon suite. It was the secret room he had claimed he needed for quiet conference calls because he did not want to disturb my sleep. I pressed myself against the wall beside the door and forced myself not to run in. I had built a career as an event planner by staying calm when everything collapsed around me. A collapsed marriage, I told myself, would have to be handled the same way. First, I needed information. Their conversation came in pieces. Vanessa said she still could not believe he had brought his wife and girlfriend to the same resort. Brandon laughed and told her the rooms were far apart, and I trusted him too much to question his schedule. He did not explain the whole betrayal like a villain in a movie. He did not need to. The parts one heard were enough. She thinks I am at the gym, he said. She thinks the room is for work. Vanessa asked when he was leaving me. Brandon said, after I get what I need. Her family knows people, and her business money is useful. She signed the agreement without reading it. Then he said the sentence that finally cracked me open. He said, I love what she can do for me. I love you. I slid down the wall, my dress soaking up the cold water from the melting ice. A hotel employee named Angela came around the corner and stopped when she saw me on the floor. She asked if I needed help. I almost said no, because pride is strange even when your heart is being destroyed. Then I stood up and showed her my banking app. There was a charge connected to the resort, larger than anything Brandon had admitted to. I asked whether the charge was tied to room 2847. Angela looked uncomfortable and said she could not share another guest's private information. I understood. I did not beg her to break rules. I simply asked her to direct me to guest services so I could request a copy of any charges made with my card or from an account bearing my name. She walked me there quietly, and the manager confirmed only what he was allowed to confirm. I was the primary payment holder for my suite, and there was a second room linked to a separate reservation using one of my cards. He could not tell me who slept there. He did not have to. I walked back to suite 2408 without crying. That frightened me more than tears would have. 2 hours earlier, I had been the happiest woman in the resort, thinking my marriage had begun with sunshine, ocean air, and promises. Now I sat on the edge of the bed and thought about the 18 months that had led me there. Brandon had met me at a charity gala I organized in Washington, District of Columbia. He asked questions about my business no one else had asked. He remembered the names of my clients. He brought me coffee during late-night wedding setup meetings and once stayed until 2 a.m. helping me fold place cards when my assistant got sick. When he proposed 6 months later at the same gala where we met, he cried in front of everyone. I thought a man willing to be that vulnerable in public must be sincere. He made me believe we were building something real. When my printer broke the week before a major corporate event, he drove across town to find a replacement. When I worried about hiring staff, he told me my dreams were not too big. He sat beside me at my kitchen table with spreadsheets open and said, Your company should not stay small just because you are afraid of outgrowing people. He helped me choose linen samples for clients, carried boxes after long receptions, and once told my father he intended to protect my peace for the rest of his life. Those memories were why the betrayal hurt so badly. He had not simply lied about love. He had studied the kind of love I needed and copied it well enough to get inside my life. During wedding planning, Brandon insisted on handling the honeymoon, the flights, and the resort bookings. "You plan beautiful days for everyone else," he said. "Let me plan one for you." I had loved him for that. I had trusted him with my home, my future, and access to parts of my financial life that should have stayed protected. I had a separate business account, but our personal joint account held reimbursements, savings for the wedding, and money I had moved there for shared expenses. Brandon had also been an authorized user on 2 of my credit cards because my credit was stronger. I called it partnership. He called it opportunity. Now the red flags came back one by one. The locked phone, the late client dinners, the unfamiliar perfume. The way he joked that I was too trusting, as if trust were a weakness instead of a gift. Our wedding had been the kind of event people described as elegant for weeks afterward. 200 guests filled a renovated museum hall in Washington, District of Columbia, and because I planned events for a living, every detail mattered. Brandon stood under a wall of white flowers and looked at me with tears in his eyes. My father squeezed my hand before giving me away. My mother cried through the vows. Brandon promised partnership, patience, honesty, and protection. When Vanessa appeared at the reception, he introduced her so casually that I felt foolish for even noticing how long she held his gaze. She said, "Your wedding is beautiful, Taryn. You planned perfection." I thanked her like a gracious bride, never imagining she had probably watched my husband practice those vows while knowing they were not meant for me. My phone buzzed. Brandon texted that his business call was running long and that I should not wait up. He wrote that he loved me. I stared at those words until they looked like a foreign language. Then I typed, "Take your time. I am tired anyway." My hands shook as I opened my laptop. I reviewed the joint account, my personal cards, and every charge I could see. Restaurants I had never visited. Jewelry I had never received. Hotel deposits that did not match our suite. Charges over months, not days. I did not move money that night. I wanted to, but anger makes people careless, and I refused to give Brandon away to make me look unstable. I called the 24-hour fraud department at my bank instead. The representative stayed calm when I explained that my husband had used accounts connected to me for undisclosed personal expenses and that I needed to protect my credit. She froze my cards, removed Brandon as an authorized user from future use, ordered new card numbers, and advised me not to empty the joint account until I spoke to an attorney, because transfers during a separation could be disputed. She placed a security note on the accounts and told me to save statements, receipts, and written communication. After that, I called the airline and changed only my own ticket. I split my reservation from Brandon's, paid with my personal business card, and booked a flight from Key West to New York City for the next afternoon. I did not touch Vanessa's ticket. I did not pretend to be Brandon. I did not need to. His own lies were already expensive enough. When Brandon came back close to midnight, I was in bed pretending to sleep. He showered, climbed beside me, and kissed my shoulder. "Sweet dreams, beautiful wife," he whispered. I kept my breathing even. Every part of me wanted to turn around and ask him how he could stand at an altar, look into my eyes, and promise forever while his mistress waited in another room. But I stayed still. The next morning, I woke before him, showered, dressed, and put on enough makeup to hide the fact that I had not slept. When he stretched and said, "Morning, beautiful. Did you sleep well?" I smiled and said, "I slept enough." He checked his phone under the sheet like a teenager hiding a secret. I asked if he wanted breakfast on the balcony. He said he had a client call in the business center. I told him work never stopped. He kissed my forehead and left to lie to me again. The moment the door closed, I gathered evidence carefully. Brandon had left his wallet on the dresser and his suitcase open. I photographed a jewelry receipt for a necklace I had never seen. I found a photo of him and Vanessa tucked behind a card, and on the back someone had written, "For our real honeymoon." I did not open locked accounts or hack into anything. His email was already open on the shared tablet we had both used for wedding travel documents, and the booking confirmations were sitting on the screen. I took photos of what was visible and stopped. Then I called a family lawyer in New York City whose emergency line answered before noon. Her name was Evelyn Grant. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, "Do not destroy anything. Do not threaten him. Do not post online. Preserve evidence, protect your credit, and leave safely." Evelyn told me that the prenuptial agreement could be challenged if Brandon had misrepresented his finances, pressured me to sign without fair review, or used the marriage itself as part of a financial scheme. She warned me that infidelity alone would not erase a signed agreement, but the emails, card charges, and timing could matter. She also told me not to claim money was mine simply because I felt it was mine. We would trace deposits properly with bank records and my accountant. That advice steadied me. It turned revenge into strategy. I called my accountant, Mr. Walker, and asked him to begin separating business deposits from personal funds. I forwarded statements to Evelyn. I backed up photos of the receipt, the room charges, the open travel confirmations, and Brandon's text messages. By the time I finished, I was not shaking anymore. On my way back from the private business room, I passed the pool. Brandon sat inside a shaded cabana with Vanessa, his hand resting on her knee. They were not bold enough to sit in the open, but they were not careful either. I stood behind a column and took one clear photo. He laughed at something she said, leaning close like a man on a honeymoon with the woman he loved. I looked at him for a long moment and realized I was not losing a husband. I was escaping a performance. In our suite, I packed every item that belonged to me. I paid my own checkout balance with my new card and requested a written receipt showing no remaining charges on my room. I left Brandon's belongings exactly where they were. The necklace box sat in his shaving kit. I placed it on his pillow with a short note that said, "For your real honeymoon." My longer note was calm. I wrote, "Brandon, I know about Vanessa. I know about room 2847, the charges, the emails, the photo, and the lie you built around our marriage. I have removed your access to my cards and frozen any account connected to my credit. I have not touched anything that is legally yours. My attorney will contact you. Do not call me except through counsel. I am changing the locks when I get home if the landlord confirms I am allowed to do so. Your belongings will be handled legally and delivered to your mother's address. You said I was too trusting. You were right. That ends now." I signed it, Taryn. Not wife. Not ex-wife. Just my name, because that was all I belonged to now. Leaving the resort felt unreal. Couples held hands under palm trees. The ocean looked too beautiful for what had happened beside it. At the airport, I sat in the lounge and watched Brandon's messages arrive while I was still on the ground. First he sounded worried, then confused, then angry. He asked where I was. He said the front desk told him I checked out. He said his cards were not working. He said I had embarrassed him. I did not answer. Once the plane took off, I connected to the in-flight wireless internet and forwarded the messages to Evelyn. Then I blocked him. I did not eat dinner. I sat by the window, watched Florida disappear beneath the clouds, and finally cried quietly into a napkin. My marriage had lasted 3 days. The betrayal had been planned for months. I landed in New York City late that night and went back to the apartment I had shared with Brandon. My key still worked because I had not lied to myself about the locks. The apartment looked the same, which made it worse. His books were on the shelf. His mug sat near the coffee machine. Wedding gifts were stacked in the corner, still wrapped. I collapsed on the bed fully dressed and cried until my throat hurt. In the morning, Evelyn called before I could call her. She had reviewed what I sent. "You are going to be fine," she said. "But from now on, every move must be clean." She arranged a meeting for the next day. My landlord confirmed that I had been the original leaseholder and Brandon was listed only as an approved occupant, not a co-tenant. With written notice and proof of the domestic situation, the landlord agreed to start the process of removing his access and changing the locks. My best friend, Shanice, called an hour later. "Please tell me you are safe," she said. "Brandon's mother just called me saying you abandoned him in Florida and stole his money." I laughed once, but it sounded empty. "I am home," I said. "And I did not steal anything." Then I told her everything. She listened until I finished, then said, "I am coming over." I told her I needed a few hours alone first. She respected that, but she checked on me every few hours like she promised. That afternoon, I met Evelyn in her office. She was direct, organized, and careful with every word. She said the funds in the joint account had to be traced. She said Brandon's charges could support a reimbursement claim. She said the prenuptial agreement was not automatically gone, but we had strong grounds to challenge parts of it because of misrepresentation, lack of independent counsel, and his written intent to use the marriage for money and connections. Over the next week, I stopped moving like a heartbroken bride and started moving like a businesswoman protecting her life. Mr. Walker prepared a report showing which deposits came from my event planning company. The bank kept the joint account under review while transferring traceable business funds into a protected account on legal advice. I changed passwords, updated emergency contacts, separated insurance information, and removed Brandon from every service I was legally allowed to control. A locksmith changed the locks after the landlord's written approval. I packed Brandon's belongings with photos taken before and after, then shipped them to his mother with tracking. It felt cold, but it was not cruel. It was documentation. Cruel was bringing another woman on your honeymoon and paying for it with your wife's money. Vanessa texted me from an unknown number around midnight. She wrote that she did not know Brandon would turn on her, that she thought he loved her, and that he had promised to leave me after the honeymoon. She said she still had a flight home later in the week, but she had no room security deposit, no money for extra charges, and no one willing to help her. For 1 second, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered her smile at my wedding. I wrote back, "You knew he was married. You made your choice." Then I blocked the number. The resort manager called the next morning because I was the cardholder for one disputed deposit. He kept the conversation professional. Brandon had caused a scene when his cards declined, and when staff told him I had removed my payment method from anything not connected to my own room. I saved the voicemail. Brandon came back to New York 2 days later using money his mother wired him. He emailed me from a new address because I had blocked his number. He wrote that I had humiliated him. He said he had made a mistake and that I had destroyed our marriage by overreacting. He said he was willing to forgive me if I forgave him. I forwarded the email to Evelyn without responding. She replied, "Good." He admitted enough. Say nothing. Then the public lies began. Brandon told family, friends, and former wedding guests that I had abandoned him during a mental breakdown, emptied his account, and ruined him because he had gotten too close to a colleague. His mother repeated the story until people started looking at me like I was dangerous. I stayed quiet because Evelyn told me silence was not weakness when evidence was waiting. The humiliation Brandon earned came during mediation. He arrived with his lawyer and his mother, who insisted on sitting in until the mediator allowed her only for the opening family discussion. My parents came with me, not to fight, but to hear the truth stated clearly. Brandon started with the same performance. He said I stole money, stranded him, and punished him for a mistake. Evelyn opened a folder and placed one document after another on the table. Bank records traced my business deposits. Card statements showed jewelry, meals, and room-related charges tied to Vanessa. Travel records showed he booked room 2847 the same day he booked suite 2408. The photo from the cabana appeared next. Then the email where he wrote that he needed to get through the wedding because my family connections would help him. His mother's face changed first. She looked at him like she had never seen him before. The mediator asked Brandon whether the email was real. He stared at the table. His lawyer whispered to him, then Brandon finally said, "Yes." The room went silent. His mother stood up and said, "You told me she was lying." Brandon tried to reach for her arm, but she pulled away. That was the moment he lost the audience he had been performing for. Not in a courthouse hallway full of strangers, not through gossip, but in a quiet room where documents spoke louder than his charm. Evelyn did not smile. She simply said, "My client wants reimbursement for unauthorized personal expenses, control of her business, enforcement only of fair provisions, and a clean separation." Brandon's lawyer asked for time to review settlement options. For the first time since I had dropped that ice bucket, I felt the ground under my feet again. The truth did not stay trapped in that room. Brandon's mother called Shanice that night, then called my parents. She did not give me a warm apology, but she corrected the lie she had been spreading. "I was wrong about what happened," she said in a voicemail I kept for my records. Brandon did not tell me the whole truth. That was enough. The same cousins and friends who had sent stiff little messages about forgiveness suddenly went quiet. A few apologized. Most simply disappeared, embarrassed that they had defended him so loudly. I did not chase apologies from people who had been eager to believe the worst of me. I had something better than their approval. I had proof, peace, and a lawyer who told me to keep moving. The divorce did not end overnight. There were document reviews, revised settlement drafts, and long calls where Evelyn reminded me not to let anger make decisions. Brandon contested the reimbursement amount, then backed down when Mr. Walker's report matched the bank records. His employer opened its own review after discovering personal expenses on a corporate card, including work trips that were not really work trips. I did not call them. They found the pattern through their own audit once the divorce subpoenas touched his expense records. 3 months after the worst day of my life, we signed the settlement. I kept full ownership of my business. I kept control of my lease. I recovered a large portion of the money he had spent on Vanessa. Brandon kept whatever was truly his and walked away with his reputation damaged by his own choices. The employment fallout became its own kind of exposure. Brandon's company did not fire him because I asked them to. They suspended him after their internal review found hotel upgrades, meals, and travel expenses he could not justify with client records. A human resources investigator contacted Evelyn for documents already disclosed in the divorce, and she provided only what was legally appropriate. Months later, I learned through the settlement file that Brandon had agreed to repay part of the company's losses and accept probation in exchange for avoiding a trial on the smaller charges. I did not celebrate that. I simply noticed the pattern. When people lie in one part of life, they often leave fingerprints everywhere else. Brandon tried once more after the settlement to make himself look wounded. He sent a long email to several mutual friends saying he hoped I would one day heal from anger. Shanice forwarded it to Evelyn before I even saw it. Evelyn responded with a short legal notice reminding him that continued false statements could affect the settlement terms. Within an hour, Brandon sent another email saying he wanted privacy and would no longer discuss the marriage. That was the closest thing to accountability I ever got from him. Not an apology, not remorse, just fear of consequences. It was enough for me to stop waiting for anything better. 6 months after Key West, I stood in my small new office in Brooklyn and felt pride for the first time in a long while. The space was not glamorous yet. It had white walls, 2 desks, rented chairs, sample books stacked by color, and flowers I bought myself every Monday morning. But it was mine. My first employee, Denise, handled creative boards while I managed logistics and client relationships. We did not become famous overnight. We took corporate holiday parties, intimate weddings, nonprofit fundraisers, and birthday dinners that required too much attention for too little money. Still, the work was honest. Every invoice was clean. Every contract had my name on it. Some nights I still cried in the shower. Some mornings I woke up reaching for a man who had never really existed. But the grief got smaller as my life got larger. I also started therapy because rebuilding was not only a legal process or a financial one. My therapist asked me once what I missed most about Brandon, and I surprised myself by saying, the version of me that believed him. I missed being easy with love. I missed assuming good intentions. I missed planning dinner for 2 without wondering if the other person was lying. Healing meant admitting that I had not become fearless. I had become careful. There were nights when a delayed text from a friend made my chest tighten. There were days when a client's wedding vows made me step into the restroom and breathe until the tears passed. Still, every time I returned to my desk, signed a contract, or solved a problem, I proved to myself that Brandon had damaged me but had not defined me. A year after the divorce, Brandon walked into my office without an appointment. Denise came to my door looking uncomfortable and said, "He says he will not leave until you talk to him." I told her to stay nearby and asked the building security guard to stand in the reception area before I allowed Brandon into the conference room. I did not meet him alone in my private office. He looked thinner, older, and angry in the way desperate people get angry when consequences finally arrive. He said he needed a letter from me for his fraud case at his old job. Not a character witness in court exactly, he explained, just a statement saying he was not malicious and that I would not pursue additional damages. I almost laughed. He had lied to me, used me, blamed me, and now wanted me to soften the truth so he could look better. "You are asking the wrong woman," I said. Brandon leaned forward and lowered his voice. "Taryn, you know I am not a criminal. I made mistakes, but you know my heart." I looked at him and remembered the hallway, the melting ice, the red dress, the photo that said, "Our real honeymoon." I said, "I know your actions." He said I had moved on fine, that my office proved I had not suffered. That was when Denise stepped closer to the glass wall, and I was glad she could see me remain calm. "You do not know what I survived," I said. "You know what you lost. That is not the same thing." His face hardened, and for a second the old Brandon returned, the man who thought pressure could bend me. "People should know what you did to me," he said. I opened the conference room door. "They already know what you did to yourself." Security walked him out when he refused to leave immediately. I called Evelyn afterward, and she told me his lawyer had sent a routine request for a support statement the week before. She had rejected it and documented the rejection. Brandon had come in person hoping emotion would do what the law would not. That night, I did not feel powerful. I felt tired, but I also felt free. The kind of freedom that comes when a person who once controlled your emotions stands in front of you and finds no door back inside. I went home, made tea, and slept without dreaming about Key West. The next morning, I had 2 client meetings, a site visit, and lunch with a bookstore owner named Quentin Moore, who was helping my company with a literacy fundraiser. He was kind, patient, and never pushed me to be more healed than I was. I took my time with Quentin. We had coffee twice before dinner, and dinner many times before I let myself call it dating. He knew the shape of my past, but he did not treat me like a broken thing. He asked about books, budgets, clients, and the parts of life that had nothing to do with Brandon. Slowly, I learned that trust did not have to mean blindness. It could mean watching how a person behaved over time and letting consistency matter more than charm. My business grew the same way. Not by magic, not because one article made my phone explode overnight, but through referrals, careful planning, and clients who trusted us because we delivered. A local magazine featured my office 2 years after the honeymoon, and the attention brought more inquiries than we could handle at first, but not more than we could manage. Quentin once asked me what I needed in order to feel safe. We were walking after dinner near the water, and the question was gentle, not demanding. I told him I needed time, truth, and consistency. He said, "Then I will not rush you. I will not hide things from you, and I will let my actions speak longer than my words." I did not melt at the sentence the way the old me might have. I watched what he did after he said it. He called when he said he would. He respected boundaries without sulking. He remembered details without using them to impress me. That was how trust returned, not as a flood, but as small cups of water offered again and again. One of those inquiries came from a bride named Erica, who sat across from me twisting her engagement ring and confessing that she cared more about the marriage than the party. I liked her immediately. I did not tell her all the details of my divorce. I simply told her, a beautiful wedding should support the relationship, not distract from it. She exhaled like someone had given her permission to stop performing. That was when I understood how my work had changed. Before Brandon, I planned perfect rooms. After Brandon, I planned honest moments. I asked couples what promises they wanted to keep after the flowers died and the photographs were edited. Some people found that too serious. The right clients found it refreshing. Those were the clients who built my reputation again. On the 2nd anniversary of my office opening, I hosted a small party for the people who helped me rebuild. My parents came. Shanice came with flowers and teased me for wearing white again. Denise raised a glass and said, "You know what I love about working here? You trust us. You hire good people and let them do their jobs." I smiled because that lesson had cost me more than money. Trust was not foolish when it was earned. Love was not weakness when it was honest. The party wound down slowly, with music playing low and city lights shining through the windows. Quentin stood beside me near the glass, not touching me, not claiming me, just being there. That meant more than any dramatic promise. Later, when the office was quiet, I looked at the framed photo on the wall from our first successful fundraiser. I thought about room 2847, suite 2408, and the woman I had been in that hallway. She had been humiliated, but she had not been helpless. She had been heartbroken, but she had still been smart enough to wait, watch, document, and leave. Brandon thought he had taken me on a fake honeymoon and made me the joke. Instead, he exposed the truth early enough for me to save myself. I do not thank him for that. I never will. But I no longer hate the memory. It reminds me of the night I stopped begging a liar to love me and started choosing myself. Before I turned off the office lights, I checked one final email from a client thanking us for making her parents' anniversary dinner beautiful. I smiled, locked the door, and stepped into the Brooklyn night with my keys in my hand and peace in my chest. No shouting. No revenge speech. No need to prove anything to anyone. Brandon had wanted my money, my connections, and the image of a perfect wife beside him. He lost all of it because he mistook kindness for weakness and trust for stupidity. I kept my name, my business, my dignity, and my future. That was the ending he never planned for. That was the life he never got to touch again. And this time, every part of it was mine. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.